See, this morning on Heaven and Earth, Sir Cliff Richard, one of the most successful pop stars Britain has ever produced.
It's true, it's true.
It is true, actually. He's with us live. You are live, aren't you?
Just
yeah,
about,
live.
just about.
Right throughout the programme. And as if Cliff isn't enough, we have Robin Gibb, Pete Doherty's mum Jackie, and a look at the continuing anger over the Pope's controversial speech. So I hope you'll join us for Heaven and Earth at 10 o'clock.
Switch on and watch me.
Morning from me, and it's good morning from him.
And it's a little early for me.
A bit early. I'm surprised you're even up and about myself, but there you go. In the next hour, Sir Cliff Richard, Britain's most enduring pop icon, we'll be talking about how his Christian faith has sustained for nearly half a century at the top. And with ongoing anger at the Pope's comments on Islam, we ask how they damaged relationships in Britain's multi-faith communities. So hope you'll stay with us for Heaven and Earth.
And me.
Good morning. I'm absolutely delighted you've been able to join us for today's very special Heaven and Earth. Now, as well as telling us about his remarkable journey through his life and career, Sir Cliff will be sharing his take on the big stories of the week and indeed singing for us right at the end of the programme. Also this morning, Bee Gees star Robin Gibb will be asking us to take a minute out of every hour for silent contemplation. Apparently, it'll make you happier. Troubled pop star Pete Doherty's mum Jackie tells us how faith has helped her through the private agony of her son's very public battle with drug addiction. And we'll be looking at the future of Germany's Jewish community, as this week the country ordained its first new rabbis since the end of Nazi terror. But first, the figures, of course, speak absolutely for themselves. He has spent something like 23 years in the charts, over 250 million records sold, 52 international number ones, and 59 best-selling albums. Sounds good to me. So Cliff Richard has been a musical icon since he became Britain's first rock and roll star.
Boom, boom, can't you hear my heartbeat? Bang, 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 like the sound of a big bass drum. Way down, down, I can feel your love. Good times, even better times to come.
Cliff shocked his fans by announcing at a Billy Graham crusade that he had become a born-again Christian. There were rumours that he was even thinking of giving up music at that point, but thankfully he didn't. And I'm delighted to say that Cliff is with us this morning.
Good morning.
As you say, you had a late night last night.
I did.
You were raising what money for charity?
The NSBCC have an appeal called Safe Place Appeal, and John Hargreaves is a friend of mine who kind of organises it, asked me to come down and be there. And Scylla was there too, and the Drifters were there, and Bobby Davro was there.
And you raised £1 million?
Yeah, they broke the £1 million mark. It's fantastic. It's wonderful. But then everyone is concerned about the future of children, and you know, children who don't ask to be born sometimes find themselves in excruciating situations, and if you can alleviate that, everyone wants to be part of it.
Well, we're glad you're with us anyway in Manchester, and that we got you up nice and early to sing sing live.
It was getting a bit late last night. It really threw me.
Now, I want to go to that point of 1966, as I mentioned. How shocked were the fans at that point?
Well, you know, now as I look back on it, I'm thinking about why were people surprised? I mean, conversions have happened through history. People have changed their minds about things through history.
But you were the bad boy of pop at that stage.
Well, I never really was.
Well, you were sort of
the media kind of wanted to have me thrown against the Elvis figures and the people that came from America, and I was sort of the nearest one to them, so they used me as that. But I was never rebellious. I just sang because I really liked rock and roll, and I still do. But I guess the advent of a spirituality in my life surprised everybody, because rock and roll didn't seem to have that background. And I think now more and more people are understanding that when you become a celebrity for whatever persuasion you happen to find yourself in, you're still a human being, and spirituality, as far as I'm concerned, has become a main stabling factor in my life. I need that all the time.
And as you say, people like Bono, for example, I mean, a lot of younger stars, if I can put it like that, they can have their faith and be accepted for that.
Yes, absolutely.
Whereas in your day, it was a bit shocking. I mean, was there a catalyst for that at the time, in your case?
My father's death played a major role in it, because I'd given up going to church when I was 14, and I always think my mum and dad were so clever. I came home once from my confirmation class and said, I don't know what this is about, I'm not going. Now, rather than go, you will go, they said, okay. And then 10 years later, there's me turning it up as a Billy Graham rally, 11 years later. because I'd given the freedom to do something else. And what I couldn't shake was, and I come back to my father here, lots of things in life disturb you and you can't figure out, why does it happen? Why am I not hysterically happy when I've got the job I've wanted since I've been dreaming? And my father died and I suddenly felt bereft a little bit and thought, oh, and I actually thought about contacting him through a spirit medium. Somebody said to me, you know, you shouldn't do this, it's a dangerous thing. And I said, well, the Bible says. I said, the Bible says. What do you mean the Bible says? And they showed me 2 or 3 places where it says don't dabble with wizards that chirp and mutter and kind of suggest that we don't do it. So I thought, well, this is amazing that the Bible would have an answer for anything like that. So I started to read it out of interest, the New Testament particularly. And when you read the New Testament, you're confronted by the most incredible character that's ever been written about. I mean, if it was fictitious, it would be unbelievable. But he's a part of history, so it makes it absolutely stunning reading.
Do you remember that feeling you had at the Billy Graham crusade when you actually made the decision to
I don't think
convert?
I've ever been through anything like it before, and I've never been through anything like it since, because once you've actually articulated what you believe, publicly say, I am a Christian, I am a follower of Jesus, and I trust in all of that. Once you've done it, you've actually taken the biggest step of your life, probably. All I know is that Billy Graham asked me to come up, and he said, would I sing? But first of all, I had to say something. So I was introduced, I stood at the podium, he had a podium, and I held onto it like this. And I said my bit. And then I sat down and I couldn't bend my arms. Now, isn't it funny? I couldn't bend my arms. So I sat down and I slowly rubbed them. And somebody said to me afterwards, you know, when Jesus was in a high tension, he perspired blood. And I never quite understood that, but apparently that can happen. Now, maybe something congealed or something in my arm, but I was so frightened of doing this that it affected me in that strange physical way. So I'll never forget that moment, but I've never regretted it. That was an instant of nothing. It was a strange kind of feeling, but since that time I have found it much easier to utter the name Jesus, to talk publicly about God. To me, it's a natural part of my life, and it is for a lot of people. It's not just me.
Did people at that time think that you couldn't be a Christian and be in rock and roll in that world at the same time?
You know, I suppose it's what you're surrounded by. It's the pressures, the unseen pressures that are there. I became a Christian and suddenly I started asking myself, what am I doing? How dare I be wealthy and famous and I've got friends who are Christians and they're working for charitable organizations. I should be doing all of this. And so I did actually contemplate. The mistake I made was I've always been very open with the press, and I kind of told them what I was feeling. And I said, look, you know, I'm going to give it all up. Well, a year later, I changed my mind. Well, they had a field day.
Did they?
But I'm glad I did, because I thought sometimes we do things, and it's not a bad thing to do things on the spur of the moment. You tend to speak what you really feel when you say it like that. And I did that because that's what I was feeling. But there's nothing wrong with changing your mind. People change them. I hate reading it when they say, this politician was a communist 42 years ago. And I think, well, I'm glad he isn't now. So he changed his mind. There's nothing wrong with changing your mind. And I changed my mind about that aspect of my relationship with God and my relationship with people and myself. So I decided I would stay in and that I could be of more value where I was. And I believe that if you allow God to use you, he does. He doesn't abuse you, though.
But was there a price to pay? Because, you know, on one hand you could say, well, you know, you were recording rock and roll very much so at that point, having endless hits. But when you start going into gospel music and maybe recording Christian music, you know, a lot of radio stations don't want to play that stuff, do they?
No, that's true. I found it not too difficult, though, because what I'd said to myself, if I'm going to stay, and I did it because part of the reason was because Billy Graham's organization, who I'd now met, actually invited me to be in a film. And what they said to me was, we're looking for a Christian who will act in our film, and it's hard to find them. And I thought, oh, so they're asking me because I've done films, and they want me to be an actor, but also because I'm a Christian. I thought, wait a minute, this can work together. That's why I changed my mind. So what was your question again?
I know, I was saying, was there a price to pay? Well, I mean, I suppose there's a price to pay on different levels, really, because you, at that stage, you would have lost a bit of street cred, wouldn't you?
Yes, I did it. Although, funnily enough, when I did the Billy Graham, when I went onto the platform and presented myself for the first time ever as a Christian publicly, there was the press did go to town on the whole thing. And, you know, I suppose it was a story for them. But that year, that Christmas, I did a pantomime at the London Palladium. We broke all box office records. So even though they're in a certain group of people, I would have lost some credibility. In terms of the public, they're usually ahead of us anyway. On the whole, they're usually waiting for something to happen. They either like it or they don't like it, of course, and that's up to them. But in this case, they seem to be ahead of even myself. So I shouldn't have worried, but I did worry for quite a bit. But in the end, it wasn't so much that. It was the fact that, for instance, I was doing an interview at the Top of the Pops, when I was doing Top of the Pops once, and the break came and I had plenty of time to go and talk to her. And they said to me, "You do realize that people laugh behind your back?" Well, I was really upset. You know, I was upset that people would laugh. Here's me thinking I found something really wonderful in my life, and rather than be happy for me, they were upset. They were deriding me. So that was the bit that was slightly painful. And but you know, when I look back now, I could never take offense at that sort of thing. Because you can be disappointed, you can be hurt by it, but that's what the freedom we have in democracy is, that they can feel whatever they like about me. They can think whatever they like about what I believe. It's not going to change what I believe, but they were the moments that I feel now that I went through a bad time, but that's gone. Even that's gone now, Glo. When you survive all the garbage that comes out written about you and stuff like that.
Do you mean when you're as old as you are?
When you're as old as... Well, it's true.
I'm only teasing.
It's
The longevity in the business.
With age, though, you gain a certain confidence that nothing that they say is ever going to take away.
Yes, I was just about to say that, you know, there would have been scepticism, presumably, at the time, but when you go on to remain at the top and to continue to have hits in every decade, which nobody else has done in this country.
It was a fad for a lot of them. They thought it was going to be a fad,
exactly.
You know, a passing phase.
And then, you know, your knighthood and everything, there comes a point, really, that you turn the corner and you're a national treasure. Oh, Cliff meant it all these years after all.
An heirloom, an old one.
No, but you do in the end gain the street cred, because you've had your convictions about what you really believed in.
I think people still look at all of us, and if you're solid in what you do, they respect that, even if they don't agree with you. They respect that. I find myself respecting people. I've become less judgmental as I get older as well, that you can't afford to judge other people because you don't know where they're really coming from. All you've got to do is, if they're on some kind of journey, whether it be spiritual or otherwise, you think, wish them well. Wish them well. They may finally find something in their life, as I did, that changes it forever.
And of course, spirituality. I mean, if you go to LA, for example, spirituality is the big thing. I mean, it's almost like a new craze is hardly the right phrase, but it is really a big issue now, and people are allowed to have, you know, deep beliefs and allowed to indulge in investigating spirituality. So it's a much more accepted thing these days.
I think so, and it's also the fact that I think there seems to be sort of cycles all the time, and whereas we've been through a patch when it seemed like when I first became a Christian that things were really kind of, everything was low, we were all put down, and that's not there anymore. And I think it's because even I think as Christians we've grown up. I've certainly grown up as a Christian, so that, as I said to you, I'm not going to put myself in the place of being a judge. I'm just going to welcome anybody who says I'm on some kind of spiritual pathway and I'm looking for enlightenment. That can only be a great thing for the society and particularly for the individual. So it's easy to go to places like in America. In fact, America's always worn its heart on its sleeve. I couldn't get over it. When 9/11 happened, what do? The president called them to prayer. I don't know whether that would happen here, would it? Our churches might call us to prayer, but the country wouldn't necessarily. So I've always found the Americans very open like that. So you're right, if you go to places like LA, spirituality is an accepted thing, and I would say it's wonderful that we need to get back to spirituality. How are we going to deal with the world we live in if we don't have something that's outside us that you believe can hold on to and control us?
How does your deep faith, as we've established, how does that determine your life, your career? Well, in a way, it infiltrates, only because, for instance, simple little things like if I find a lyric. When I first got the song Devil Woman, I loved it. But at that stage, I'd been doing Summer Holiday and stuff, and I thought, I'm never going to be allowed to do this. And then I thought, why were you allowed? I was doing an album with Bruce Welch. I had that song. He had a whole bunch of others. I said, what do you think? He said, great. I said, I'm going to have to change some of the lyrics. The lyric was basically about someone who dabbles in the occult. So what I did was, it's still about a man who dabbles in the occult, but it says, beware, stay away, and if you find yourself in that situation, get out of there fast. And it became a warning. And do you know, there's one letter that came to me from a woman in Australia who said that she didn't get involved with the occult because she heard, now I find this miraculous, she heard the message in that song. You know, so, I mean, if it was only for that one person,
I didn't change the lyrics as a message. It was just that I felt free to sing it because it was no longer applauding the occult.
We must talk a little about what's happening in your life at the moment, because you're still as competitive as ever. You've just done a new album which is all about duets, and on a new tour. So when's the tour begin?
The tour's going to start in Wembley on the 4th of November. Yeah,
so are you deep in rehearsals for that now?
My mind's already thinking about things, and I've already chosen the songs I'm going to do, and I've just written a blurb for the programme, and I had to write this thing. I get so many letters of request for songs. I would be there all night singing the requests, so I have to, and I've said to someone last night, what I do is I sing some of the oldies for the next 2 tours, and then to give myself a break from them and everybody else, I sing other oldies. So sometimes when you come to a show, you may not see the one that you're desperate to hear, because I did it last year. So I've got all that worked out, and I'll be immersed deeply in it in October.
Yeah, and who's on the album duetting with you?
Oh, it's wonderful for me. You know, when you sing with people like Dionne, I mean, I remember buying and rushing out and buying Dionne Warwick's music. I sang with Dionne Warwick. I actually sang right alongside her. It doesn't always happen. I sang with Anne Murray, who I didn't stand beside.
Canadian singer.
The Canadian singer from way back who had Snowbird.
And of course Daniel is going to be in the programme next week. Daniel O'Donnell.
Daniel sang with me, and we did a Carpenter song together, and I sang with Barry Gibb. I sang with Brian May of Queen. He sang a little bit, but he played guitar.
I noticed you didn't ask me to sing in this duets album. You know.
Well, I'm trying to sell the album, Gloria.
Oh, well, okay.
Sorry.
Listen, for the moment.
You can sing good. We should do something together.
Only when I've had, well, I was going to say when I've had a glass of wine. Anyway, Cliff, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. But I know you're going to be around right throughout the programme.
Sure.
Thank you. And as I said, Cliff is going to be back with us later on and singing right at the end of the programme. It's our way of getting you to stay right. I want to bring Cliff in on this, actually. He's just made his way over from the other side of the studio, because I know you've got a very strong opinion on what you feel the Pope meant by all of this, or intended by this.
Well, I mean, it's difficult for us to stand and to make comment about this. It's really difficult. All I know, I've never met him, but you don't become Pope by not knowing a great deal. So his theology goes back. He's apparently a very bright man. Now, the trouble is, maybe now, all these people have got to have advisors behind them who look through every word that might or may not offend. And I find that's a very difficult area, particularly because we live in a... I mean, I mentioned when I was talking about my faith, if I was to take offence at some of the things that was said about me and about Jesus and about God, I'd be an absolute mess by now.
Yeah. What I really want to know now is, because I know, Phil, that you work, you know, trying to bring different sides together, and, you know, with multi-relations and all that sort of side. What effect do you think this is going to have? Is this going to knock your work back?
Well, I know that it has done. I've heard statements already from the Catholic community and from the Muslim community, both very upset on different sides for different reasons. One, the Catholic community reacting to what it sees on the television screens with Muslims burning effigies and things like that. And I know that the Muslim communities that I mix with as well are very upset at what has been said. And at different times, when we saw the thing about the cartoon earlier on in the year, I was with young Muslim women at the time when I was telling them what had happened. And just to see the reaction when the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is criticised in that way. The same thing would happen, I think, to many Christians if Jesus was seen to be criticised in a very difficult way. We would react. There'd be that sense of...
I mean, saying sorry is sometimes really difficult, but maybe that's the answer. I mean, I'm sorry.
I think he underestimated the weight and the extent to which this quotation would be heard. I think the interview with Sir Cliff was very interesting, because he said that you have to have confidence so that whenever somebody knocks you, because people will, this is a free society, just as Muslims knock other religions and people of other faiths, you have to have the confidence. But, you know, the father and I were speaking earlier, and we said that, you know, the Muslim world really feels like it's been had. It feels like it's being attacked from all sides. And this is sort of a symptom of deeper sort of hurt and disappointment, but it doesn't justify it. But it makes, you know, this
I'd like to pick up on actually a point that Cliff made, because I mean I've been trying to read through a lot of this over the last few days. Now, of course, we have to bear in mind this was a 3-hour speech, out of which this one line has been taken out of context. But as Cliff makes a very valid point, wouldn't it be better at this stage, with everything that's happening around the world, for the Pope to actually stand up, you know, make the statement to say, you know, this is what I meant, this was out of my 3-hour speech, and if it did, I personally apologise, as opposed to sending an envoy to say he's sorry.
The difficulty is what do you apologise for? For making the offence? It's very important. The wording is very important as to what you apologise for.
You could apologise for just offending. I mean, you can say something innocently and you can break someone's heart. And all you have to do is, oh, I didn't want to break
I didn't
your
mean
heart.
it that way.
We all do
So,
that.
yeah, we all do that.
all
So,
do that,
but the thing
yeah.
is the Pope is in a status of his own, and again, I don't know the ins and outs of what the Pope can or can't
Do you think he will
say.
apologise?
I suspect that he will, because he doesn't want to cause offence. And if you saw the speech that he gave in Cologne in 2005 to young people, he was talking about the importance of respecting the identity of particularly the Islamic communities.
We'll have to leave it at that point, but thank you all very much indeed for your various views. Thank you. Now, I know that discussion will have provoked strong reaction. You'll have thoughts of your own. We love to get your views, so you can text, email or call with your comments. Still plenty of time to come on this morning's Heaven and Earth. And, of course, we'll be here to give you all the reaction from our guests. Now, he had us boogieing for decades, but now Robin Gibb from the Bee Gees says a moment of silence in every hour can help us through life. It's every mother's worst nightmare, a child wrestling with serious drug addiction. Bad boy rocker Pete Doherty's mum, Jackie, will tell us how her faith helps her cope with her own prodigal son. And with this week's ordination of Germany's first rabbi since World War II, we'll be asking Rabbi Baroness Julia Neuberger how much Germany's Jewish community has recovered from the Nazi Holocaust. Now, earlier this summer, we asked you to send us pictures of antiques you had at home which could have religious significance. Well, thanks to all of you who've contacted us. There are clearly so many of you who had your own fascinating items. Well, this week, our expert David Harper has been discovering the story behind a little Buddha statue which has a surprise for its owners. Well, Robin Gibb there, and of course that big event, and he did give you the website, I'd never remembered, but we can always contact us at Heaven and Earth and we'll give you further details if you need it. But we now turn to a subject which affects so many families in this country. It's every parent's worst nightmare, a child wrestling with drug addiction. Now for Jackie Doherty, mother of rock star Pete, that private grief has become a public agony as every twist and turn of her son's struggle with heroin is conducted in the full glare of the public spotlight. 27-year-old Pete Doherty has become more famous for his problems than his music. Now, your comments have been coming in fast and furious right throughout the programme, so thank you for all of those. Different reactions to different subjects, of course. Mark in Glasgow, good morning, Mark. He says the reaction of Muslims across the world is an illustration of how intolerant people of faith can be. Respect is a two-way street, and whilst I don't agree with the Pope's comments and the fact that it's out of context, I do think religious communities should be more willing to hear opinion that doesn't match their own. Thank you for that comment. Again, on the same subject, Rob, who's in County Down in Northern Ireland. Good morning, Rob. He says public speeches are carefully constructed and words are deliberately chosen. So why should Pope Benedict retract them to placate Muslim feelings? People should not be afraid to voice free speech. And I'll try and get through a representative selection as we go right throughout the morning. Now, there's still enough time, of course, to get in touch. We're always glad to get your comments, so do keep them coming in. Now, each Sunday we look at some of the moral and ethical issues behind this week's news. This week, Muslim journalists Farina Alam and, of course, Sir Cliff have been taking a look through the papers. So I know you've been busy. Both of you have been ferreting away, catching up on your stories. Cliff is going to start off. You've got a great headline there, Cliff.
I have. I love it. Sinner ladies. Look at this. And, of course, it's about the fact that Jamie Oliver had gone into schools and was trying to take good, wholesome food to kids who perhaps sometimes don't get the kind of food they should have.
Yeah, to do with his school dinners and that.
Yeah, school dinners, and the children didn't seem to like the good stuff, and so the mums were taking in their, you know, the sausage and chips and buns and stuff like that. And
so they're actually handing these through the railings, aren't they?
Yes, but of course it does show. I saw a bigger picture than this one, and it just had 3 ladies doing it, so it's not like the whole nation has decided against Jamie Oliver. And I don't know about you, I've dieted. You can diet, have all the good food, and then on a Sunday I binge out. So maybe the parents should say, let's get the kids healthy and get them through life and give them a good future because their bodies are strong, and let them have a binge out on a weekend. I
can't really repeat Jamie Oliver's language in this programme, but let's say he just said it was a disgrace because these mothers, I mean, long-term, could actually be shortening the lives of their children. So, Farina, how did you feel about it?
Well, my husband calls it the revenge of the plebs because it's expensive to eat good food. If you want organic food, it's very expensive. expensive, and most families can't do it. But parents need to realize that in the long run, they're reducing the lifespan of their children. And if you watch, shows like Honey, We're Killing the kids throw such tantrums when you try and make them eat vegetables. But parents need to stand up, because, giving them junk food is not love. Love is making them eat what is good for them, because ultimately they will live a healthy and fruitful life.
Okay, next story now. This one is about taxes. I'm going to bring Cliff in a minute on this, because it's one right up his street. So what's this spelling out?
Taxes are a moral good, and avoiding your fair share is a moral disgrace. Basically, Polly Toynbee is saying that the rich are not paying their fair share of taxes, not because they're doing it illegally, but because there are all kinds of consultancies that have, 50 ways to legally evade all the tax laws. And this is something...
And actually, it's big business, because you have
Yes.
credible companies.
So,
you should say it's avoiding tax, isn't it, as opposed to
absolutely,
evading?
legally. But, if for someone like me, comfortably poor, I wouldn't have the resources to... I wouldn't have the resources to hire someone like this, tell me how I can evade my taxes. But so she's saying that that's unfair.
And also, I think the point that's being made is the fact that these taxes are needed for services and for health and for education, and there is a good solid reason why we pay our taxes. Sure. But you existed in an era when you paid something like, what, 98p in the pound?
It was 83p in the pound on income tax, and then what? The 17% that was left, if you invested it somewhere, they would then take 98% of what that made, the interest on it.
That is just unbelievable.
It was iniquitous, and of course I absolutely agree. If a country doesn't run well if you don't pay taxes, but there's got to be a common factor. The thing about the big business people, of course, they pay massive taxes because they earn that much more. But what happened was in that period I'm talking about, the 87%. Most of the really wealthy people left the country, so the government got 83% of nothing.
But you stayed. I mean, the interesting thing is that you stayed.
Yes, I mean, and there was ways. You're right. It's not illegal to avoid. And what happens is they have these consultants. They find the loopholes and they make use of it for a while, and then the government just shuts the loophole up.
But they reinvent themselves.
Other
ways of evading your taxes.
Right, next story is, this is a very sad fact that in this country, we have such a high percent of teenage pregnancy. But this is a new fact about that subject.
Affluent suburbs show fastest rise in teenage pregnancy. So, inner city boroughs like Tower Hamlets have seen a 25% decrease, whereas, affluent suburbs like Windsor have seen a 45% increase. So people are asking the question, what is it that makes affluent children or children of affluent parents more likely to... I wouldn't say more likely, but the increase in those communities is greater. And, people suggest that, the access to opportunity, life of luxury. Also, there's another report this week that the children of affluent parents are more toxic than anybody else in this country. So this idea of, the family relationship, how, how parents and children are communicating, what time parents have for their children. Places like Netherlands...
Always seems to be back to the parents, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, it does in the end. It does come down to that, doesn't it? But it's a terrible sort of... It's a problem, isn't it? You've got parents who want the absolute best for the children. How many times have you heard people say, I want it better for you than ever we had it? Yeah. And sometimes you can go so far working to earn money that you don't have time to give them the love that they need and the way of expressing themselves through life, where they don't have to get involved with early pregnancies and abortions.
I know several children who have intercourse and they get pregnant out of rebellion because they can't get their parents' attention. I mean, it's a very small minority, but this is a very complicated issue.
Yeah, it is a complicated issue, and
issue.
I'm sure we'll come back to it on our comments from various parts of the country really later on the programme. But for the moment, thank you very much. I just have to leave it there, actually, because got to move on. We've got to get time for Sir Cliff to sing at the end of this programme. But a very important one, myself, actually, on Friday. I'm looking forward to that enormously. Now, obviously, Cliff and Farina have been listening to the significance of that. It just really feels hugely historic, doesn't it?
I think it's very important. It just made me realise it's taken over 60 years for something like this to happen. I'm shocked by that. But it goes to show how, you need to give people time to make that change, come forward. Like she said, it was human beings who decided to make this change. And
just a couple of comments before Cliff sings his song. This one comes from Terry in Newport. It says, the Pope has said nothing wrong, but his timing is catastrophic. We've got into a vicious circle of knee-jerk reactions on all sides. If not the Pope, who can we look to for thoughtful, constructive input? Cliff, I thought you might like to pick up on that.
Well, I mean, I don't know how we do this, really. I just love the way that, in the end, when I read the actual speech, or part of the speech that they had in the Times yesterday, it ended up with him saying, violence is incompatible with God. And I'm thinking, in the end, that's what we all believe. Everybody believes that about their God, however we approach him. And I found that really good. And I feel really sorry for him that he's found himself in this position. As you said, there's no way that he would have gone out there, I am going to offend Muslims today. No way.
Well, I would like to thank you both very much indeed. I've loved listening to all your comments. And I suppose, Cliff, I'd better let you go and join your musicians for the song that we've been looking forward to so much. Thank you, Farina, very much indeed. Now, before Cliff does sing for us, there's just enough time to tell you that we have a whole host of big names coming up over the next few weeks and months. So you can't afford to miss Heaven and Earth any Sunday. We have, for example, Lionel Richie, Liza Minnelli and Michael Ball. But next week, it's Daniel O'Donnell, who has some of the most loyal fans in the business, apart from Cliff's, of course. And he's going to be singing for us live in the studio. And we'll be talking to some of his devoted followers. Hollywood star Rupert Everett will share his journey from Catholic boarding school to the wackiness of life in LA. That's next Sunday at 10 o'clock. But right now, here is Cliff with a song he recorded in Nashville. It's called Faithful One.